Okay, we're gonna go ahead and keg this beer into that keg now. It is an Irish Red I made. I used a clone recipe for Caffrey's Irish Ale that was floating around, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. I made it on January 20th, and today is February 16th, so that's 27 days, so 4 weeks in the fermenter. And the reason I'm trying to get this done today is that I am getting ready to make another brew, probably in an hour or two. And I want to use this fermenter, and I want to reuse the yeast in the bottom of it. So what we're going to do is make a new beer, chill it, and then pump it on top of the yeast cake that's left in the bottom of this fermenter. But first, we got to get the beer that's in here out. We have a keg. I am not going to bottle any of this today. I'm just going to keg it. Over here in the sink, I've got a bucket that I've cleaned out. That's the dip tube from the keg. We'll put that back in here in a second. Oh, I've got priming sugar because we're going to carbonate this beer in the keg with priming sugar. I've got gelatin and hydrometer, a scale, sanitizer, my laptop running Beersmith. This is the socket and ratchet that I used to get the liquid port off of the keg. This is a pin lock keg. And obviously measuring spoons and some keg lube. So this is a floating dip tube that I've had in a different keg. It didn't wow me, but I think we're going to try it again. We're going to reinstall it into this keg that I have never used. This keg I got refurbed from Beverage Elements. It's a refurb, it's clean, all that. It comes pressurized and with sanitizer in it, but I haven't actually used it yet. So I think the floating dip tube is going to go in there, and then we'll keg our beer after that. So let's get going. Okay, the reason I took this dip tube out of the floating dip tube out of the keg where it was too long. And it ended up sinking to the bottom of the keg, and then it would loop back up so that the draw was above the liquid level. So it's because I didn't trim it. You're supposed to trim them when you install them. So I've now trimmed this one to fit the length of the dip tube that was in there, which is actually, it might be slightly short, but I think it's going to be approximately the right length. Got that soaking in sanitizer. I'm going to, I poured the sanitizer from the keg into this bucket. I'm going to add the rest of the floating dip tube pieces into the sanitizer. Okay, I've got can we see it? The floating dip tube assembly in the keg. It's floating in, you can see the remains of sanitizer down there. Keg, I stored it with some sanitizer in it. I got it from the vendor, opened it, put some, and checked that it held pressure and all that, and then I put some sanitizer in it, I think last night. I've got the post installed again. There's some keg lube on the O-ring under it. It ought to hold pressure just fine. And just a side note here, all of my kegs are labeled with a sticker from a different vendor so I can see at a glance which keg it is. This is my Blackstone keg. All right, next thing we're gonna do is get our beer going and get it in there. Okay, I've got my spray bottle of sanitizer as well as a bucket of sanitizer. When possible, I immerse, but sometimes the situation demands some sprinkling. So occasionally I'll have to do some Presbyterian style sanitizing instead of Baptist style sanitizing. Now we're gonna use sugar to carbonate this beer. I've taken the stopper out. Stopper's over here in the bowl. That stopper's gonna have to be rinsed out before I use it again. There's a little gnat that managed to get in there, but that's fine. They occasionally do that. You just rinse them out and keep going. They're not gonna get all the way through the liquid and into the beer. So now we can pop the top on this beer, see what it looks like. It's been, I think today would be day 28, right? It's been 27 days. Does that make today day number 28? I don't remember. So if I was just going to discard the trub and use the fermenter, like wash the fermenter out, resanitize it, I would be a lot less careful about this than I am now because I intend to reuse the trub that's in here. So what I'm going to do is slowly kind of pop the lid and take a look. Make sure there's no krausen in there. See, there's a krausen ring. I have in the past donned a bottle of beer that really wasn't done yet, and I just, as a rule, take a look before I do anything else. Okay, cool. What we're going to do next, we're going to pour off 2 samples of beer from here. One will go into the hydrometer because we're going to get a gravity measurement of what this beer is, because we need that for our ABV calculation. I will not sanitize the hydrometer because what we take as a hydrometer sample, we will then boil on the stovetop with some sugar to make a priming solution. There's not a lot of point to sanitizing it. We're going to boil the beer that's in there anyways. I will, however, draw a second sample. You can see I've already sanitized that measuring cup. We're going to sanitize that sample, and we're going to stir half a teaspoon of gelatin into it, just unflavored gelatin. And that gelatin, then we'll mix the gelatin and the sugar and get them into the keg. Now, nothing I'm about to do here is original with me. Everything I'm doing here, I've picked up from someone else. The combination might be original, but the elements are not. So, gelatin, I'm only using half a teaspoon. I could use more, but I found half a teaspoon seems to work for me. Gelatin has to be dissolved cool and then heated up, but you only want it warmed up to about 150, 160 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere in there. After that, it actually forms Jell-O, right? So we want to keep the gelatin dissolved, and we want it to be hot enough that it enters the liquid nicely and distributes through the keg. Excuse me, but we don't want to cook it to the point where it solidifies. So 150 Fahrenheit, 160 Fahrenheit, that's as high as we're going to go with the gelatin. The sugar is going to be boiled in beer. So the hydrometer sample will be the solvent, and we'll dissolve sugar into it. We'll bring it to a boil. What we're then going to do is add hot sugar beer to cool gelatin beer and monitor the temperature. Once it hits 150, 160 in there, we will stop mixing them. We'll set the gelatin beer aside. We'll pour the sugar beer into the keg. We'll begin drawing off the beer from the fermenter. And when we're done, we'll add the gelatin beer to the keg. Then the keg will be sealed up. We'll put it on the kegerator for like 10 seconds, just long enough to put about 30 psi on the lid, just so the lid sets. Once the lid sets and we're confident we're holding pressure, this keg will just be put aside, and it'll take about 3 weeks to condition. Now, it's way faster to force carb your keg. That is, just run the beer in flat, seal it up flat, put it on the kegerator, and pressurize it from the kegerator, agitating the beer over the course of a couple hours, and you will get carbonated beer. Way faster. It's also way more effort, and I refuse to put in that level of effort today. Another option is we could keg the beer flat, put it, seal it up, put it in the kegerator at serving pressure, and leave it for like a week. They say 5 to 8 days, but a week. Come back at the end of a week, your beer should be carbonated, ready to go. That's probably the least effort to get carbonated beer. However, it's an opportunity cost that I'm not willing to make I have a small kegerator. I just don't have enough space to leave beers in there on gas that aren't ready to go. I need to reserve the space for taps I actually have. So what I've settled on doing is carbonating with sugar, doing the natural carbonation, boil sugar in the hydrometer sample of beer, pour it in here, rack the beer on top of it, add defining agent, if any, and I don't always use gelatin, but I'm using gelatin today. Seal it up, and then put it aside. I'll put it in my office, and I'll leave it there for a couple weeks. Now, I've already got one in there, so I can leave it there for, this isn't the first one on deck. I've already got one on deck in there. The idea being that I want to eventually have a whole bunch of kegs ready to go just on deck. And then as I kick kegs in the kegerator, I can take them out and put a new one in right away with no fuss. I like natural carbonation. Not everybody does. It's definitely slow, but it's going to be the cheapest possible method to carbonate this thing. So that's the rundown. Last note, gelatin is not vegetarian. This is made from cow hooves or horse hooves or whatever it is they use to make gelatin. So as a result, the beer will not be vegetarian. Now, your traditional English bitters, Guinness, a lot of beers made in the British Isles are fined with, was it isinglass? Isinglass? I don't know how to say that. I don't know if it's isinglass or isinglass. But it's fish swim bladders. And so traditionally, your traditional British beers or your traditional Irish beers are very frequently not vegetarian. Given that this is an Irish red, I think it's appropriate to say it's not. I think it's fine to fine it with a non-vegetarian fining agent. I guess technically, if you use isinglass, then it's at least pescatarian, but whatever. I don't have that many guests, and the ones I have eat meat. Okay, hydrometer samples poured. Again, this is not sanitized. This is fine. We're just going to boil it in a minute anyways. I'll pour the other sample now that we'll use to dissolve the gelatin. Okay, the hydrometer sample's reading 1013. It's 64 degrees, so there's not really a temperature adjustment there. So we're good. It's a 1013. A little under attenuated, but not enough I'm going to worry about it. I've got gelatin stirred into a cool beer sample over here. So now what I'm going to do is weigh out the sugar I need for priming and put it in this pan. Beersmith says I want 1.43 ounces of sugar. Yeah, that doesn't work too well. Let's try that again. There we go. See, we want ounces. We're going to put the pan on here and tear it out. Come on. There you go. Tear it out. Okay. So we're going to put 1.43 ounces of sugar in there. We're going to combine it with this hydrometer sample. We're going to bring it to a boil, and then we'll slowly add it to this gelatin beer until we get this gelatin beer to about 150 Fahrenheit. Now, I'm just going to say, last time I did this, I ended up using the entire hydrometer sample, and I never quite got the gelatin beer. I think it was like 145 or something. I'm not worried about it. It'll work fine, but it's not like I'm going to have to use it's not like I'm going to have to add this after the fact. There's not going to be enough heat. Okay, I've got the beer and gelatin mix. I just keep stirring it. Again, the thermometer, the vessel, they've all been sanitized. This is sanitized. And I keep saying that because this is not going to get to a boiling point. It may be warm enough that it's pasteurized, but I don't think it'll be warm enough for long enough. So I'm trying to keep that sanitized. Over here, the hydrometer sample in the pot with 1.45 ounces of sugar. I'm up 2/100ths of an ounce of sugar higher than Beersmith told me. Not worried about it. I generally sort of undercarbonate things. And one of the reasons is that if I overshoot the sugar, it's not a big deal. Honestly, that much sugar in 5 gallons of beer isn't going to make a huge difference. When I first started brewing, I bottled with priming sugar dissolved in water. And it was actually, I think, Basic Brewing Video or Basic Brewing Radio, whichever one they had their podcast on at the time. I had a thing about how we bottle. And when I saw them use the hydrometer sample as their priming solution, I was like sort of an epiphany moment. It had always bothered me that I was adding water to beer after measuring its specific gravity. So yeah, okay, probably a cup of water isn't going to make that big of a difference. But the idea that I can use the beer as the solvent for the priming solution, it just works so much better. Okay, so this part takes a while. I'm just bringing this beer plus sugar up to a boil. Honestly, I've got too much volume over here where the gelatin is. So I could probably dump this entire gelatin solution into the boiled beer. Even at a boil, it's not going to get that over 165, but that's not, I don't think I'm going to do that, but you could. Over here, I've got my lid for the keg lid and a piece of vinyl hosing are both in the sanitizer. And I've got my coffee going now. I can put the scale away, I won't need it anymore. Once, we're just waiting on this to come to a boil. Once this comes to a boil, the kegging day is almost over. Okay, I've poured all the boiled beer and sugar into the gelatin beer, and it only hit like 125 Fahrenheit. So if I had a microwave, I'd put it in the microwave, but I don't. So I'm just going to go ahead and dump this in the keg and start siphoning the beer. Okay, I poured the gelatin and sugar beer solution into the bottom of the keg. I'm now racking beer in. See, it's a decent color. It's a little pale. It's not quite an Irish red, but that's okay. This was the last beer that I made on my old system. I started using an Anvil Foundry a couple of weeks ago, so I'm going to make my next batch on that, and the water's already hot for that. It's just waiting for me to clear up the fermenter before I go out there and start weighing and measuring and grinding, milling grains. So we're going to basically just let this thing drain. I normally just kind of go full open on the valve. Like, I haven't noticed that big of a difference between if I rack it fast or rack it slow, but I thought today I would try getting the valve about half open. So I've got it about half open. There's no air bubbles. No, I'm wrong. There are air bubbles in the line. Look at that. Maybe I'll just open it. One advantage of priming with sugar is that a little bit of oxygen's not going to hurt because I'm trying to rouse the yeast again. Is it enough that won't oxidize the beer? I have no idea. There are plenty of people willing to give opinions on that kind of thing, and some of them might even know what they're talking about. Well, I've never had this problem before. There's still a good couple pints of beer in there, and this thing is totally full. So I'm going to cap it up because when you're out of space, you're out of space. But there's a disadvantage of kegging over bottling. With bottling, you can just get another bottle. With kegging, I don't think it's worth finding bottles and sanitizing them and getting a bottling wand and calculating priming sugar for that much beer. So I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Maybe I'll just feed it to my chickens. So it ends up being that I had about a quart, almost 2 quarts. It's probably like 1.9 quarts or something, but almost 2 quarts extra beer. I'm going to just feed it to the chickens. They like beer. The alcohol's not high enough that I'm worried about it hurting them, and I'll probably water it down anyways. I'll dump it in their water. But that's a little annoying. There's a disadvantage of kegging right there. If I was bottling, I could have just sanitized a couple extra bottles. Oh well. I've got to go out. We're going to go out now. We're going to set the lid on the keg with a little bit of pressure from the kegerator, and then we'll put it aside. And let's see, it's about 10 till 10, so it's almost time to get on my next brew day. Okay, this is the keg we just filled. So what we're going to do is open the kegerator, pull a gas line out, and put about 30 psi on it just to set the lid of the keg. I'm not going to try and show that because it's going to be complicated. It already takes 3 hands and I don't want one holding a camera. One of the reasons I use pin lock kegs, actually the main reason I use pin lock kegs, is that I just don't have much vertical space in this kegerator. It's just very small. I think I can probably get a third keg in there if I move the CO2 tank off to the side. So at some point, I'm going to go ahead and drill a hole in the side, probably the other side of the kegerator, and move the CO2 tank out and see if I can put a third tap here, because I just don't drink enough to burn through the rate to burn through these kegs in the rate I need to. This tap here is a keg I put on tap in October. Here it's February, so it's 4 months and it's still going strong. I think if I had a little more variety, if I had more taps, I could have more variety and less be tied to just whatever the 2 things are that I put on until I keg. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. Because I don't drink that much, I probably want to go ahead and get some more taps going. All right. I don't like that I had to throw away 2 quarts of beer, but there's still plenty of trub in that fermenter. We're going to go ahead and start today's brew day here in a minute. I'm going to have to weigh out some grains and mill them and all that. Then we'll mash in. I set this guy up on a delayed start last night. I want to dough in at like 145. I'm going to actually mash at 145, but last time I set the dough in temperature a little high, thinking that adding the grain would lower it, and it really didn't. So this time I'm going to just dough in at mash temperature and see what happens. It's not going to hurt anything. Let's see what else have I got going on. So we'll set this lid first. That's our first order of business. We'll take this little blue tape label off the fermenter and put it on the keg so I know what's in there. We will put that aside. I don't want to leave it out in the garage. It's too cold out here for the conditioning. We'll put that aside, put it back in the house, and then we'll start measuring grains for today's brew day. I don't think I'm going to try to video that. I think I'll just try to limit myself to the kegging operation.